All right. Hello, hello. I'm Isaac Gutierrez. I'm here with Dr. Thomas Absher, and stepping into this conversation, I'd like to kind of get back to your education and your roots and where the interest in physics and the universe begins. You've told me before that um, you studied at Navy Nuclear Power School, and I'd like to, yeah, just check and see where how that came about and how you got involved with that.
Well, my first, every road kind of, leads from every, it has a be every place you start has a
Yeah,
previous start, so it's a little hard to say where
exactly.
something actually started. But I was really interested in electronics as a little kid. My granddad gave me a Morse code set. It was these two boxes, and you press a light here, and it'd go on over there, and so you do, and that really fascinated me. And my in Cub Scouts, I built a crystal radio, and that was exciting, and I thought that was amazing, and tried to get my ham radio license, but never really was able to. I lived out in the country, and you couldn't really, wasn't really anybody to go and take the test from. I could have done it if I'd tried hard enough, but I didn't, and but I was just fascinated by science, and I would always give these little lectures on. We had in sixth grade, we had to do a report. We'd tell people something that happened during the day, and I would always choose something from Time magazine. There was a science article, and I would always do a science article from Time magazine. And in sixth grade, we had to do a science fair, and I did a fair. My science fair was called the uranium atom, and it was this. It wasn't really an experiment or anything. It was more like a display project of just some research that I did about atoms. And I really, at sixth grade, you don't really have a lot of resources available, especially not when you live in Vanderbilt, Texas, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not like this is academic institution you can go do research. I didn't even know what that was. So
Yeah.
anyway, I did this thing. I was really interested in atomic energy, and I thought that was fascinating. And then I did another research, did another science project on the ultraviolet light in seventh grade, and I won first place for that one. And it was basically just really good. Another research project that was really great showmanship with the black light and stuff. And in eighth grade, I did a science project called the radio wave, which again was another, just a showmanship. And
Yeah.
but in when we actually got into you know, chemistry in 11th grade and then physics in 12th grade. That was when I actually really started being interested in, and it totally, just absolutely, completely confused me. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. It absolutely mystified me. They would talk about things like energy and force and all these equations. And I'd ask people things like, energy, what is it? And they could tell me some ideas about where you would see it and what it would look like. If you had a ball, rolling down a hill, it had kinetic energy, and it also had rotational inertia in it, and rotational angular momentum, and had these different things. And light bulbs, put out, made heat, and they also put out light, and both of them are forms of energy. And nucleus broke up, and it had energy stored in the atom somehow. And I don't know, I was just confused by the whole thing. And so I had no mastery whatsoever of it, but I was really interested. It was like fascinated me, like, what in the world is this thing that we're studying? And so I was pre-med. My dad was not pre-med, it was pre-engineering, pre-science.
So this was
And
high school. This
it
was high
was,
school that you were getting into, and then
mm-hmm,
going into college
mm-hmm.
engineering.
And so my dad was an engineer, so I'm going to be an engineer. And so that was really where that came from. And I like science. I thought it was just fascinating. Um, and there was actually one point, it was between childhood and high school. I don't remember what age it was. I think it was around 9 or 10. I was reading an astronomy book, and it was like telling me all about the universe. And I thought, oh, wow, it isn't just all these pretty uh, stars in the sky, and it's just mysterious and magical. It's like amazing. They were telling me how what these actually were rocks that went around the sun, and there was hydrogen that was being burned up in the sun, and it wasn't just magic. And I thought, oh no, it's not magic. And I and I had to, I made there, I remember it just, I was riding in a car at the time and I was reading this and I had this thought come to me. I said, if I keep reading about science, all of the magic is going to disappear. And I'm going to have to make a decision. Am I going to just go through life looking at everything and just going, wow, I have no idea what's going on there, and it's just magical? Or I can look at it and go, oh yeah, I see that. There's atoms there, there's rocks, it's, formed this way and that way. And I had to make a decision of which way I was going to go. And I
Right.
said to myself, okay, I'm I'm just gonna let the magic go. I'm just gonna have to let the magic go. I'm gonna find out how everything works. And so I made that vow as a very young child to figure out how everything works. And well, I came to high school and I got to physics, and everything I asked everybody about how it works, like what is mass? Well, it's energy and it's these particles. Well, what are these particles made out of? We don't know. We know what they're made of, but it's mass. And what's time? What's mass? What's space? What's energy? It's nothing. None of the fundamental questions about all this mystery that I'm trying to understand. None of it would. Nobody was actually telling me anything that actually dispelled the mystery. It just was. We got down to a certain point, and all we had was mystery. And so and it made it really hard. It made it really hard to remember anything. The way I remember things is I know what it is, I know why it works, what happened going from here to there, and I can say, okay, this is what it is, and this is why it works because it follows these sequences. My dad used to have a little phrase. He always used to say, Tommy, things move in the direction they're pushed. And this is a statement of Maxwell's, or not Maxwell's, Newton's second law. I think it was force equals mass times acceleration. So things accelerate in the direction they're pushed.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that makes sense. But we got now we have another question. What is force? Well, it's what's pushing. Well, where does the force come from? How does that move? How does anything move anything? Well, it's got a positive charge and it's negative charge, and they're pushing against each other and they repel. Well, where did this positive and negative charge come? Where did this charge come from? What's that? Well, we don't know. We don't know what it is. And so most, most of physics came down to saying, well, we don't really know why any of this happens, but we've got all of these great formulas that describe how they, what happens with those things that we don't understand. So we can tell you all where the energy went, how it went from this thing to that thing, how the force caused this to move and accelerate, and how the particles actually can move and why they move and where they move and what energies they can be in. But we can't tell you about anything about what they fundamentally are. So I ended up going to UCLA and engineering program, and graduated to kind of a specialty in electrical engineering and power, the power distribution. I also took classes in nuclear engineering because I knew I was going to be going to nuclear power school.
nuclear was kind of a side or a minor to the main study, um,
They
which
didn't, at UCLA at that period of time, they didn't really have a specialty. You could kind of specialize, you took more classes in a particular area, but you didn't come out and you would say, well, I am an MS or a BSEE, because you didn't really take enough classes to have actually mastered that particular field. But I did take a lot of electrical engineering classes, but again, it was, it was all a bit mysterious. I learned all the equations. I learned how to use them and what they meant and what. But
so
again, the
so
fundamental mystery was always there.
yeah. So at this point, you're going and taking these classes at UCLA. You know you're going into Navy nuclear power school.
I was a naval ROTC, so I was in the drill team for a couple of years, and I was practically everybody when we started the Navy ROTC program. Almost all the kids, maybe at least half, maybe more, were engineering, and the number of people that finished, there were only three of us that ended up finishing the engineering program. It was very difficult, and so, but anyway, as a result of having gone through engineering, they asked if I'd like to do nuclear, Navy nuclear. Went back and I got to see Admiral Rickover, and they interviewed me and had all the questions. You had all these tests you had to take, and then you went through an interview with Admiral Rickover, and they selected me, and I went, got into the program. And after I graduated, then they sent me to Vallejo for 6 weeks, 6 months, for 6 months to basically we covered our entire engineering course in 6 months. It was really intense, and but they emphasized a lot of nuclear energy types of considerations. Again, we were dealing with particles that we didn't know what they were. We just knew they did what they did, and they kind of had named them and identified some of them, and how they work. So it was very practical. It was like how it works to have, uranium atom and having a neutron come and combine with it and have that go unstable and have that then go into break up into, a couple different decay fragments and those, were released with a lot of force, which then transmitted, vibration to the surrounding area, which was converted into hot water. It made the water hot, which it was called the primary loop going through the reactor, and that then went through a secondary loop in the steam generator. Basically, it was a boiler, and the boiler then made steam, and the steam then went through turbines. So the primary loop was radioactive. It had a lot of radioactive elements in it, and they were separated. When it went through the heat exchanger in the secondary, it just transmitted the heat, but it didn't allow the radioactive elements to get out of the primary loop into the secondary loop uh,
Safety encasing that allows it to send the energy out or send the heat out, but not the bits of it that are radioactive.
mhm, mhm. So that was the thing that was kind of that was really the big picture of the thing was you had a heat source with breaking up energy, nuclear decay because of these neutrons that were allowed to run into uranium atoms and cause them to be unstable. When they absorbed a neutron, it became an unstable atom, and it broke up into another atom in a fission process, breaking up into two particles, releasing, a gamma ray and releasing, probably other things, probably alpha particles and electrons and probably a number of different decay products. And each of those things then were, when they were released, um, went out with a lot of kinetic energy, and when it runs into other things, that kind of causes a vibration of the whole thing it runs into, which basically vibrating molecules is really what heat is. And so it turns a decaying atom into heat. It converts what was just a couple particles flying apart, it confines them and makes them kind of jostle around, and everything else jostles because they got jostled. And so the heat from that then is transferred to the water in the primary loop, and that then goes over. They got pumps that are pumping the water. Interesting the second half of our training, we went to Idaho Falls. It was a little town out of Idaho Falls, and it's about an hour bus ride from there. I lived in Pocatello, and other people lived in Idaho Falls, but it was to the west there, close to Arco. It had a lot of reactors out in the desert, in the Idaho desert. Anyway, we went out there, and they had a couple buildings, and they had some simulated submarines there. And one of the ones, the submarine that I was on there, the simulated submarine out in the middle of the desert in a big swimming pool, it was a big bathtub. This one was actually didn't have any pumps in it moving the water. What they actually did was they had it engineered so that the water, when it was heated, would go out the top, and then it would be kind of force its way over to the steam generator, which would cool it by making it transferring all that energy over to the water that was running through the secondary coils. And that in cold water would come out the bottom, and that would be denser, and that would then pull and drive the water over to the reactor, and it would be heated up, and it would make this convection loop. And the idea of that was that whenever if you don't have any pumps, then you don't make as much noise, and so you have a lower sound signature for a submarine. So it's as a stealth, tool. It's a way of staying quiet.
Yeah, that's incredible. So that was the last half of the last 3 months or so that you were in this simulated submarine, and this is actually at the site where this nuclear reactor is, or this is
Hmm.
entirely
Hmm.
okay. So it's
Yeah, they had they had a reactor there, and it was operational, and we could, play with it, and we trained and how to use it and how to make it operate properly. And during the day, most of the day, we'd spend in classrooms and study these different principles and how to operate the different systems associated. It's a whole ecosystem. You've got, the steam generator, which can, the turbines, which turn the electrical generators, which then, power the system, and then you've got, we didn't have a navigation system. I don't think on board. I don't remember having any of that type of thing. It was more the nuclear power aspect of it rather than the operational, the planes and periscope and different things like that. And but it was a functional reactor, and I believe they took the heat and put it through a cooling tower. I've forgotten the details about that. They must have gotten rid of the heat somehow, but I know it was a actual
yeah,
working unit. And they did fill it up with a bathtub, the big tank, but not when we were there. They had done that in earlier days when they were actually testing out the concept of this type of submarine. Then they turned it into a training site, and that's where we practiced learning about nuclear power. And this is still there as far as I know. I haven't gone out there again. It's one of those kind of areas you can't go in unless you're authorized. But
I'm just gonna visit a nuclear reactor with your pals. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
that's wild. That's wild. So, and that's your Navy Reserve at this point, or
I got out of the Navy after I didn't stay in the full time. I had a panic attack, as I was getting ready to go out on my second cruise, and I guess I was on a submarine, and it was I didn't know it was a big deal for me, but apparently it was, because the day I was getting ready to go, I had a panic attack, and so I couldn't go out.
yeah.
And while I was they sent me back to wait to be assigned to another ship, and I at that point, I found out about I saw an advertisement for a yoga class, and I started going to that. And because of that, going to the yoga class, I joined that group. It was a cult, and it was the American Sikhs, people that wear white and long beards and long
Mm.
hair and wear turbans. And I did that for about 6 years, and then I went to naturopathic college after that.
Mhm. So during your time with the American Sikhs, um,
Hmm.
it's did your study of physics change? I mean, how far removed was it from this nuclear, or did that all just compile, your previous education, your previous studies, or do you feel like you kind of took a left turn and um, studied something else or had a primary source of education?
Yeah, I was a left turn. I was going down, one road, and I went down another. So I was going down the pure science, pure engineering, pure, hard science type of path, and this was a totally different path. It was, living in a group, doing a lot of business type things. I drove taxi, we operated a movie studio, a movie theater, operated a health food store, health food distribution business. We did house cleaning. We did, oh gosh, it was just later, that was while I was in Hawaii. I did that, and then I went to LA, and I actually did worked in as a salesman, and then I wasn't any good at that, so I became the IT guy. I actually got him. This is 1980, 81, and I got a computer for the business, and they were doing had everything on little cards, the sales cards, and I got everything automated. And so I learned how to do business with that, and it was a good experience. I did shipping and kept a track of all the receivables and payables and everything, and I learned a lot how to do business in that thing. But no, the Sikh religion, it was it's a bona fide religion. It's people that's very dedicated to finding God. The particular person that we were following turned out to not be living the way that he taught, and I think he was, disgraced as a result of one of his secretaries disclosed his actual personal life, what was actually going on with him, and everybody was very disappointed to find out that he wasn't actually living like he said he was living, but like he taught. He taught one thing, he lived a different life. So that was sad. But as far as the Sikh religion, it's a monotheistic religion. We worship the one God. They had an interesting kind of way of considering that all of the teachings of Sikhism and the wisdom of Sikhism was encapsulated in a book, and so it's very similar to the Bible in that they called this the Guru Granth Sahib, and in that book they have this various people are considered saints, their sayings written in there, and we would read that, and it sounded to me a lot, if I had to categorize it in something we are familiar with, it was kind of like reading Psalms. It was basically praising God.
Mhm.
Um, it was just a glorifying God. So and you would get up early in the morning, and we'd do yoga, and we'd read from the Guru Granth Sahib. We'd do meditation, and then we go about our day. And so we did that for 2.5 hours every morning, and I did that pretty consistently throughout the 6 years I was there.
Mhm. But
As a result, I don't sleep very much now. I apparently imprinted that, so I don't sleep much.
and you didn't sleep back then,
Well,
or
you couldn't because you had to get up at 3:30 every morning.
oh wow. Yeah.
And so, you're up late and you get up early and you might catch a nap, but it really it disturbed my sleep cycle. That the Navy was like that too. The Navy, we're on four off, four on four off four, so you would have um, a disturbed sleep cycle. It would be just a little this, a little that, a little this, a little that. It'd work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep, or work, 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 sleep, work, 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 and so it was. I don't remember ever getting an 8 hour sleep. We might have. I just know that we had these four on, four off type of shifts. So it was a sleep disruptive kind of environment. So combination of Navy and then Sikh, a combination of 10 years of doing that. I just developed a habit so I don't sleep very much. And
So ever since high school, you haven't had a regular circadian rhythm.
since college, actually since the Navy.
Yeah.
So about age 22 or 3, or whenever I started, graduated and went to the Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had a really good circadian rhythm since then.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
The Sikh business, Sikh Dharma was great as having a group of people that you were dedicated, you worked together, and you saw them, you knew them. It was like having a big family. I
yeah.
learned a lot about group dynamics in that, and I tried to live healthy, I tried to eat healthy, and live a moral life. It was just I would say they called it healthy, happy, holy organization. And they were trying to just live a healthy lifestyle. And their version of God, again, it wasn't a personal God. They actually called the book the Guru. And there was, it was really ambiguous, the actually who God was or what God was or where God was or the one. It seemed like one of the tenets of our particular. I can't call it a religion. It was a cult. It was around a man. There was Yogi Bhajan, and he had these certain ways that he taught, and he trying to get back to original Sikhism, but he included a lot of things that were not in Sikhism, like the yoga was not really part of Sikhism.
So like
And
age side of
hmm?
age side of Sikhism, like a newer philosophy or modern philosophy of it, or just his own
I
take.
think it was a kind of just a mixture. I think he just took a little bit out of a lot of different things. It was kind of a combination of New Age, Hinduism, and Sikhism. I don't know if there's any Buddhism in it or not. There probably was. Didn't know enough about it to say, but it was eclectic. They called it Kundalini yoga. That's not something recognized in India. They don't. There's no Kundalini yoga. But I think he made it up, and he added together all the different types of yoga. There's Karma yoga, Bhakti yoga, Jnana yoga, all these different Hatha yoga, different types of yoga that are recognized. And he just included them all and said this is about raising your kundalini, which was an energy that supposedly lives at the base of your spine. And if you do these exercises and breathe deeply and fast and kind of hyperventilate, and contract your muscles, they're kind of like doing a Kegel. It supposedly this raises the kundalini. I never had anything like that happen, and I don't know anybody that did. But anyway, that was the story.
Yeah, that was what was being sold, essentially.
Was
So
what?
that's what was being sold. That was the idea.
Yeah, that's what being sold. That was what was being
Yeah.
propagated and when you breathe really, and when you hyperventilate, it makes you dizzy, and so you feel high, and it calms you down, and so I think that was kind of like the entry drug. It was kind of like the thing you do that makes you feel like it's actually doing something,
Mm.
and it's a physiologic effect. I mean, you can't help but kind of get dizzy if you hyperventilate. Um,
But then attributing some sort of property that like some spiritual property to an effect that is you can have
Physiological.
anyway, physiological, and you can have it without it necessarily being connected to that thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean There's so many I mean there's so many cults, I guess, that promise a certain thing or study a certain thing, and there's aspects of them that are right and wrong and good and bad.
Mhm.
Um
Mhm.
but the study of them is, I'm sure you wouldn't be the same without it, and you wouldn't have opened up to other things as well.
It was very, I mean, I became a naturopathic physician because of it. Everybody in our group was becoming a doctor. That was kind of like, it would be chiropractors. I was going to be a chiropractor, but I ran into a chiropractor that was also a naturopath, and he told me about the study. And I went to naturopathic college because of him telling me about it. It was more like what I was interested in, and it was a good study. I mean, it was wonderful. But no, I wouldn't have gotten into any of this stuff if it hadn't have been for this group. It was kind of like it was a new age group. I would say, it's kind of a positive thinking and health foods and healing touch and energies and auras and just all the kind of things that are kind of associated with new age. um, I found it confusing. I couldn't it was again another one of these problems like physics. It didn't actually tell me what I was what the base level understanding of life was. It just didn't.
Right.
And I didn't tell me what God was, how to get there, what the purpose of all this was. I was just confused. But there was a funny story. Got into I just did my Sikh vows, and the next morning after he got up, I did the sadhana, the morning discipline, the morning meditation, and we were all sitting around, and this was great. I'm now here. I'm part of the group. I'm one of them. I get to be part of this,
Except
grand family thing. And there was all the men had gone off to work, and I didn't have anything to do because I was just new there. And so I was listening to the ladies talk, and the topic of conversation was how they were going to kill the rat in the kitchen. And I thought I had thought this was a religion of, complete nonviolence. That was kind of the book that they gave me to read. It was a book by Christopher Isherwood called How to Know God. It was an explanation and elaboration of the sutras of Patanjali and ancient scriptures about how to meditate and clear the mind and become one with the universe. And I thought that's what we're going to be doing. I thought we're going to actually do this enlightenment stuff. And one of the principles of this, the sutras, was a thing called ahimsa, which meant harmlessness. And so you basically don't harm anything. And I thought this is wonderful. And the first thing I find out the morning after I do my vows, I find that we're now the major point of we're going to focus our life energy on is now how to kill the rat. And, and I thought, boy, did I make a mistake.
but yeah. Anyways, we're now this force of annihilation. Help us out. Hey, Thomas, kill this rat. Oh
So
man, that's not what I signed up for. Okay.
so I had to make a decision at that point. I had to make a decision at that point. I said, what am I going to do? And I'd already, resigned from the Navy. I'd already gotten, discharged because I wanted to be a Sikh instead. And they said, fine. And I let me go. Uh, but what they wanted, this was something, and I didn't have a place to go. And I thought, I could just leave and I could just make my own way and struggle and figure out something in the world. But, I've already kind of put my foot on this path, and I'm going to just see where it goes. I'm going to see what is this all about, because it's not what I thought it was about, but I don't know what it is about. But I'm going to, whatever it is, I'm going to take it to the end. I'm going to find out what it does.
Yeah.
And so it took me about 6 years. It didn't take me that long to figure out what it was about. A year or two, three, and I kind of got what the whole trip was. But um, uh, eventually I saw a few things. I go, this isn't going to take me anywhere I want to go. And so I'm going to leave. And so I just kind of I moseyed toward the door. I didn't make any waves. I just left, moved to Portland. I was in LA at that time. I just moved to Portland, went to naturopathic college, took my turban off, and became just a normal guy. I kept my name and kept my hair long for a number of years, and then I cut my hair,
And it's back.
and it's back now. Yeah.
Let's take a quick pause. Is that okay?
You bet.
Okay, so you are having gone through um, Navy nuclear and having gone through this cult, this Sikh religion, and the study of kind of two opposite worlds, not opposite worlds, but two opposing, I would say, typically not aligned with each other ways of thinking. Um, and and both of these areas finding yourself incomplete or finding the answers incomplete. More questions are raised than answers. Um, and all of this leading into you leave this cult and go into becoming a doctor, a naturopathic doctor. And this you said this is something that a lot of your friends in this time were doing, and a lot of or you have a few people that kind of influenced you to study naturopathic medicine. Tell me about that.
Well, the people that kind of were originally kind of influenced me to go that direction, they went off in their own way, and so I didn't travel with them. They went to went to chiropractic college or different things. I went off to naturopathic college, which was different than anybody else in our little group did. But I went up to naturopathic college, and that was another left turn. It was kind of just another fork off of the direction I'd gone with the Sikh direction. It was more in kind of like the spiritual, metaphysical, holistic health type of thing that I wouldn't have gone into as an engineer. It was very different. Life science and the engineering sciences aren't, most people who are engineers don't become doctors. I mean, there's some, but it's not real common that engineers have you have a pre-med as an engineer, and then you go through medical school. I think having done it myself, I think everybody should. I totally see the body as how it works in terms of a molecular, atomic, energetic, physical uh, cause effect kind of machine.
Mhm.
So when you have when you think in terms of cause and effect and why things happen, it's a very good discipline. It's a good discipline for anybody. Everybody, to my mind, everybody should get engineering training. You should just know how the world works.
Yeah.
Um, so I got a lot out of going to naturopathic college, but I did it pretty much as an engineer rather than as I don't know, maybe as a nurse, like a caring about people or something. I wasn't a people person. I was more of a a science person. I just a typical book kind of guy.
Right.
And but all of these things, being in the group, that kind of started to change me, not being so much of a book person, more being people, because we didn't do any study or anything, in the group. Although I had to take classes while I was a Sikh there in Hawaii, and also when went to LA later as a Sikh, I was taking college courses. And so to get into naturopathic college, it was all pre-med type stuff that I had to do that I hadn't taken. So I actually took all of my anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry prior to actually going up to naturopathic college. I had actually taken all the first year classes. So as a result, I actually already knew the material prior to starting it. And so I got it at another level, a deeper level. So that was really helpful.
And
Again,
all of this informed by your engineering training
hmm
study and your study of the way things work. And so it's a earlier underlying level. And so you're really having naturopathic medicine in kind of different levels at this stage. Like just all the things that have informed it. Um, so you go into naturopathic medicine and what's the how long was that particular
it's a 4 year program. It took me 5 because I was kind of so, occupied with, other things in my life. I kept leaving and going and chasing different fantasies and coming back. But the naturopathic college, it started out, just totally left brain, just, nose to the grindstone kind of thing until there's in second year, somebody there was part of the culture. Somebody introduced me to cannabis, and that was my life. That was the place where life took another hard left.
yeah
We went way down a rabbit hole on that one. And, all of this thing, I would been on a spiritual search, a spiritual quest, trying to understand life. With that, one of my buddies he gave me a brownie, and so that became a weekly ritual.
mm,
And for most people, it just made them relax. For me, I saw visions. I saw people. I didn't see auras, but I could tell. I could almost like read people. I could see their personality and their flaws and their strengths and what was going on with them and why it was things were happening. It was almost like I had another sense given to me in that state. So I was infatuated with the experience of being able to see what I felt was a spiritual world. And this is what really attracted me about, going into the Sikh Dharma, was to be able to, see the spirit world. And I didn't get anything out of it. I just meditated a lot, but I didn't actually have any visions, no insights, nothing. And
mm.
so for me, that didn't work. But cannabis did.
Maybe if you didn't kill so many rats, you would have had better visions. No,
Yeah, that
so
was bad karma.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so these visions and this understanding kind of sounds like this kind of just opened up your mind to something that was you feel was underneath the surface before. It opened up your mind to the world around you and in a different viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. It was. I had insights about life. Oh, life is like this. There's this force operating. This is how life works. I just kind of saw, I don't know, the life became very alive. It was like everything was alive. And that sense of, if everything's alive, then there's a communication, there's a message, there's um, a life force that's expressing itself in its own character. And so I was really taken by that. But the real thing I wanted out of it was I wanted to understand why God, who is God, what is God, how did God do this? It was just the whole thing, whole God thing. That was another thing, like mass, energy, space, and time, and it was like an undefined thing. What is God? And I didn't know. I didn't have a clue.
Mhm.
But I kept feeling like if I was in this state, that maybe I would be given a gift, I would get an insight, I would have some sort of understanding of life that was very deep, that was, transcendent. I would actually understand life.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
And it didn't come. It actually did eventually, but that was a long way down the road in the meantime. I kept getting what happened. I would, people would introduce me to new spiritual groups while I was, during this period of time. It was about 3 years. I would go to a new group, a New Age or Hindu or a Christian group, or it was just anything anybody brought to me. I would go to their group and I would study and crystals and tarot and I Ching and go. I really got into each of these things, and all of them seemed divine in their own kind of way. They each had a different way of um, expressing life in a particular way, but none of them really, after I was there doing it for a while, I didn't, it just didn't, it's still, this question was still there. Who is God? I still didn't have the answer that I was looking for. So I just kept doing it for quite a while.
Yeah. So experimenting with different ideas and ideologies and groups, constantly looking for the answer that what's the source of everything, or what's God? Why am I here? All the questions that
Mhm.
a person and that's the route you took, because early on you were talking about how you can live life in ignorance, and
Mhm.
let the magic exist and not look behind the curtain.
Mhm.
It sounds like through all of these processes, you continually are not happy with the magic existing. Like, you need to know the answer, and it needs to make more sense than, here's our way of worship, or here's our thing that we do, or here's our practice. It's incomplete, and therefore almost null. It's in maybe information, or yeah. So and you're doing all this during naturopathic practice,
It's
or
not during practice. This
during
was
school?
I was in While I was in school.
Yeah. Yeah. So during the 5 year span, kind of, that you were meandering through school and jumping off and taking little side quests, um, you were experimenting with this. And do you think that you stopped the ritual of cannabis during, like, once you finished school, or kind of just kept it's a continual journey that you experimented with?
Well, what happened was I was finishing up my naturopathic education. I had to go to Minneapolis. I went to Minneapolis to study with some doctors to learn to get clinical education time. And while I was there, I had a trip where I had a vision that pretty much answered the question for me. It was kind of an unusual vision. It was what had happened. I had a roommate had invited me to speak at his naturopathic clinic to his patients, and he said you can choose anything you want. He remembered that I taught histology when I was in naturopathic college, and I was very good at it. I had a lot of people really enjoyed my lectures. And he thought this would be a good thing to promote his practice, and he thought it'd give me something to do that would, give me some purpose. So yeah, he said, "Give me a lecture, do a lecture on anything you want." And so I thought, well, I'm trying to find God. That's what the point was, you So,
Down to
and
the
so I,
nitty-gritty.
so what I did was I titled the lecture "Health and the Soul," and I had this incredible pressure on me to figure out. I wanted to give these kids that were the people that were coming to hear me on this, it was a couple weeks away. Um, I wanted to give them a really good, I wanted to tell them the answer. I wanted to tell them how life is real, how life really is. And so I had to tell them I had to know it myself. So I had kind of a timeline here to,
Okay, okay, think. How did it, what's the meaning of everything? Think.
So we codenamed this project "Find God by Tuesday," and
That's brilliant. No, I love that.
so I was had all these books I was reading. It was Alice Bailey, a book called The Soul, and several other books. There were naturopathic books, there were health books, and so I this Soul book, it had this story in it about Alice Bailey was the star was the prophet or the founder of Theosophy. It's one of the kind of a New Age kind of a religion sort of a thing. It's kind of the founder, possibly the beginning of New Age religion back in the 1800s. And anyway, she wrote this story that I was reading this book, and this is the book they were using in Naturopathic College. This was their textbook for the philosophy of medicine. So this was actually considered to be a foundational, document that described, authoritatively, this is how life is. And they were teaching kids that were coming up to be naturopathic doctors, this is how life is. Well, it's a good source, I'll read this. And the story she told in this book was about how the path of the soul started as kind of just this, slime mold, paramecium, just amoeba type thing, and then it graduated into a multicellular, sea creature, and then it became a organ sea creature, and then it crawled up in the land, it became a land creature, and then it developed legs and breasts and a larger cranium, and it became mammals, and they became humans eventually. Eventually became humans. They just evolved from the pressure of the spirit evolving itself, and then humans then became evolved beyond that, and they became angelic, and then they evolved beyond that, and they merged back into God, and they were just lost in God.
Hmm.
And I thought, I don't think I want to go there. I was not, I thought if that's the direction that, that life is going to just dissolve back into God, that completely doesn't answer the questions I need. Take a break here.
Let me sorry, one more pause. Let me just
So anyway, what we were having was I was trying to actually figure out what would be worth living, because this idea of just uniting with God, kind of dissolving into the great ocean of God, um, it sounded like we started out in God and we're just returning to God, and we experienced all of these kind of dramas and pain and struggle in the meantime, and like, what was the point of all of that? And so that particular kind of theory of start from God, return to God, it didn't sound, I didn't, it wasn't what I wanted to do.
yeah,
I
like
felt,
your autonomy dissolving back into something else and not being your whole consciousness not having any point at all.
mhm.
Okay.
I mean, supposedly it's blissful. You just dissolve into the bliss of God, and you're just in bliss. And and it's like, well, I'm sure that's wonderful being in bliss, but um, to kind of just lose yourself, to, like you said, lose autonomy, and that really couldn't actually be the purpose of life. That God went through all of this trouble to make man, or man arose and then just dissolved back from where he came. It was like, what was the point of all of that? And it seemed like, and there's all these different religions that I had been associated with. Many of them overtly were actually trying to get off of the what they call the Wheel of 84, get off of the cycle of birth and death, death and rebirth. It was like, we don't want to continue to be born again. We just want to be done and just unite with God. And so uniting with God seemed to be like a theme. There isn't one theme in the spiritual world. I mean, there's just many different things. And so this was just one interpretation, but it was one that was sufficiently like mainstream as far as what I had seen in the groups that I had been with, that I thought, wow, this really is the point of it all. There was one group in particular, Daniel Bloxham. He was a Kabbalist, studied the Kabbalah, he taught Kabbalah, and just loved Daniel. He was, of all my teachers, I probably loved Daniel the most. He was the best. But he was, his thing was he felt all religions were, that was the ultimate thing underneath all religions, was to return back to God. And his goal was to not ever be born again. And his phrase was, leaving all the worlds of name and form, never to be thought again, even by accident. So it was truly like he really wanted to get away from the worlds of birth and death and life. And it seemed like, in his study, he would go through each week. We would meet on Thursday night, and we would meditate on the Jewish symbol, the Yod He Vav He symbol, and chant the name. And the goal was again to disappear, completely be forgotten by God, just never to be thought of again, even by accident. So it seemed like this Alice Bailey story, when I heard that, it really resonated with all the paths that I had done, because I had kind of framed everything in that way. Although everybody didn't talk exactly like that, it was like, okay, you can kind of see people are kind of going in that direction of kind of getting away from all this pain of life and get into this kind of blissful state. We're just reuniting with God. And Daniel probably took it farther than most, of actually kind of just disappearing. And maybe Alice Bailey was kind of on that spectrum of kind of just disappearing to the ocean of God. She wasn't trying to just disappear and not experience anything. Daniel was, but it was kind of again on that spectrum. And I just thought about it. And it's like, I actually want something where life will actually never disappear. It will always be me and God, and I can actually be separate from God, and that I can appreciate living in his world. And that was what I decided I wanted. When I read that story from Alice Bailey, I thought, this isn't what I want. I'm not interested in going there. I'm not interested in going to the world of Daniel, the Daniel's world. I've never to be thought of again, even by accident. I just want to live and appreciate. I just want life to be good. And but I didn't know what the answer was at that point. And I was trying to, again, it was in the process of preparing for this lecture where all of this was, all these thoughts were happening, and reading about Alice Bailey and her trip, her direction. And this one of these trips I took prior to doing this lecture, I saw a vision, which was very unusual. It was an unusual vision. Most of my cannabis trips were, kind of like I'd think about this and go there and think about that for a while, think about this for a while and have an insight about that. And then eventually you come down and you go about your life, and then you go and do it again. A few days later you do the trip again and try and find God again because you didn't find it the last time. Anyway, this time it it lasted for about 8 hours. It was like the whole trip. I just saw this one picture. It was a picture of a galaxy with the galactic center like a ball of stars, really bright, and out of it, it got less and less dense as it went farther away, and you could start to see the stars very clearly farther away from it. And there was from the center of the this galaxy, there was a line going from the galaxy to each of these dots, and that was all it was. But it just stayed there for, I mean, literally hours. It just never left. And I thought, well, that was a strange trip. I wonder what that was about. It was just, I had no idea. It was just like, okay, it's an interesting picture, but it doesn't mean anything to me. And the next trip I took, I don't remember how long it was, next day or next week, sometime after that, I did another trip. And I'd never had a trip that was repeated. And it was exactly the same thing. The same picture, same galaxy, same stars, same lines to each of the stars, and it lasted the whole trip. I thought, okay, this means something. This is not a cannabis trip. This is a revelation. This is a vision. This is actually a spiritual vision. And I found the answer but I just have to interpret it. And so in a way, what I did was I started asking God, I said, what is this? What does this mean? And I had been going there while I was there in Minneapolis. A fellow down the road, the pastor of the church, had knocked on the door and invited me to come to their church. And I'd been going to their church, so I was including the Bible in my study. And I grew up as a very devout Christian and a very strong biblical upbringing and knew the Bible well. And I started having the biblical stories started coming to me, and I started asking questions about it. And one of the questions that came about as a result of being a New Ager, I was a New Ager. That was really the bottom line of New Agers are kind of people that incorporate everything, and it's a very ambiguous kind of religion, but it kind of embraces everybody. And one of the theories, one of the statements that's commonly made is there are many roads up the mountain, which is basically the many paths to God. And so it acknowledges there's nobody that is on a wrong path. Everybody is on their right path, and they'll find God whichever way you go. And it was one of those things I really bought that. It was not something that I said, oh, that's wrong. I actually believed it. And so that was one of the things that I held as actually sacrosanct, that any philosophy that I came to actually had to incorporate that truth. And as I was reading the New Testament during this period, I came across two verses that were contradictory. One, they were talking about two different things, so it's hard to actually say they were saying the same thing, but they kind of were. Jesus in one spot says, he who is not with me is against me. And another spot it says, he who is not against me is with me. And so if you take those two together, you say, well, which one is it? Is it if we're with you, then we're not against you? Or is it that if we're not with you, we are against you? Yeah. And I thought this is a contradiction is the way I saw it. It's just like, how can you make any sense of this? It's like the Trinity. How can you make I am God, I am separate, what is this thing? So I for some way, that verse, that concept, I was thinking about that concept as I was looking at this picture. that I saw. And I thought, wow, I wonder if that's related. And then I had the thought, I am that I am. And that was the mantra that we kind of looked at, the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the name of God. Um, and I thought, this picture that I'm looking at, this galactic sphere and this dot here, and they're connected by a thread, which if topologically, anything that is connected with anything else, topologically, they're both the same thing. You can squash anything that's connected, like a piece of silly putty that you pull back. You could actually, or maybe something a little bit more retractile that will actually pull back. You can pull out something that's elastic and it'll come back and it'll look like it was stretched out in a little dot, but as long as there was a thread connecting it, when you released it, it'd come back. And actually, this thing was actually part of the thing it started with. So the thing you pinched off was actually not separate. It was actually made part of the thing. And the thread between them was actually just kind of an indicator that they were connected. So I thought, this is interesting. This word, the two things, these concepts were all just going around my mind. This is the same as that because it's connected by a thread, and I am that I am could be interpreted as I am that I am. So it's really a statement of declaration or identification of the reality of the situation. You're an I am, and I'm an I am, and I created the I am that you are, and so I am that I am. And so I thought, well, how could that be true? And I thought, well, God, said, in the word beginning was the Word, and the Word's with God, and the Word was God. And so they used the word word there. Logos is like speaking, like declaring into existence. I said, looks like there's something that's declared into existence by the Word. And so I thought, well, maybe what God did to create the Word, the Son, that God said, I am that I am. And that was his method of declaring that the creating, the Son creating an other was by actually looking back at himself and then adopting that point of view as a separate point of view, and kind of like, in a way, kind of like forgetting, kind of like just ignoring, or just kind of, not paying attention to the fact that, you and me are actually from the same source, but it's always there. It's always present. I'm just not focusing on it. It's such a fine thread. It's almost invisible. It's so fine, but it's a connection that's there, and it makes that connection. It's an indicator that there was an original family kind of connection that was a source of the same spot. So that kind of sourcing idea, and that God was actually able to create other by declaration, gave me the idea that that was actually the prototypical example of creation, of how creation is done. And then we see in the second part of John 1, 1 to 4, we see that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were created by him, and nothing that was created was not created by him. So that meant the Word that he created was the one that then created everything else. Well, that fits. I mean, it kind of provides an understanding of all these spots in the New Testament where it talks about, Jesus says, the Father and I are one. Thomas, how many times do I have to tell you the Father and I are one? Or Philip, I need to Philip. How many times do I tell you the Father and I are one? You have seen the Father. Show us the Father, is what he said. And so, well, come on, guys, I've already told you. You've seen me, you've seen the Father. So it's like Jesus was very emphatic, John 14, talking about that. And so it's like, okay, well, this actually kind of explains that, mystery of the Trinity, and at least the part of the Father and Son thing being the same. It's like, why did Jesus go back and forth between, Father and I are one, and other times he says, why do you call me good? There's no one good but the Father. He clearly was separating himself from the Father there. He was actually saying, you know, the Father's the only one that's actually pure. Don't lay that on me. I can't live up to it.
Yeah, it's almost a speaking in riddles, or it's almost contradicting himself again,
Yeah.
but in different ways or in different explanations, um, but still following along that same logic of like this is I'm connected to the Father. I'm from the Father. I have the Spirit. So at this point you are you're still studying naturopathic medicine, or when by the time the pastor from the local church invites you over and stuff, or that's kind of a journey on
Well, I
itself.
was there in Minneapolis. I was going to Lutheran church, going to their study groups and their church service and stuff. And so I just, I included everybody. I wasn't, you know, discriminating in any way. It's like, well, if you're trying to find God, then, you know, that's great. I'm going to try and find God too. Let's, what's your method? And
Yeah.
really, so that's what I was doing. And so, studying the Bible turned out was like, really important thing because it was something that, had these clues in it that I was able to actually interpret this dream, this vision that was, clearly it was like, this wasn't a cannabis trip. I mean, it was, came from me. It was stimulated, certainly the cannabis, stimulated my nervous system in certain ways. But I think the contents of what I saw, I think were authorized, divinely inspired, or came up from, my subconscious in a way that, was the answer to the questions that I was looking for. And so the question I was trying to answer, is like, if he who's against me is who's not with me is against me, and who is not against me is with me. I thought about that. I said, well, I've got this, this I am that I am thing actually kind of figured out. That was always kind of mysterious. How about this, this mountaintop thing, all paths, basically lead to God thing? Maybe I can make some progress on that. Let's analyze that a little bit. And so what I did was I said, okay, how does that work? And so I thought, well, if God is pulling all people to Him, then all religious paths, lead toward God. And every religion I was with a lot of them, and every one of them was sincere as far as I could tell. The people were good, the morals, everybody tried to live a moral life, and like, wow, okay. I mean, they're trying to find God, they're sincere. And so I thought, well, that's good. But then he said, but he who's not with me is against me. I thought, wait a second here. We've got some problems at this point. So we're all going up the mountain, but it sounds like there's only one way to get to the top. So you can go as far as you want, but at some point, Jesus is going to be the way that you're going to get to the top. And so it was that understanding right there that I said, okay, that's the path I'm going to choose. That's the one. It resolved the question that I had of all paths. Everybody. It was like, what about all these people who are so sincere that are doing this or that religion? It's like, well, they're on their way. They're not there yet, but they're on their way. And all they need to do is to take one last step. And I personally believe that everybody gets their chance, to do that. And so when that happens, it could be this life or the next, and it doesn't say anything like that. It does indicate there's a heretical philosophy called ultimate reconciliation, that everybody comes to, everybody is saved at some point, and it's considered heretical. But this kind of philosophy that there's only one way and everybody's going up the mountain, and you have to get there. You're not going to get to the Father. Jesus said that very clearly. There's no one comes into the Father except by me. And so that's a pretty narrow. It's exclusive. It's not an inclusive. Christianity is not an inclusive religion. It is not a big tent. It does not say everybody's going to make it. It does not say that. But from my own personal sense of peace about life, I have to say that God is just, and people that are actually trying to find truth and really are sincere, and they just haven't been able to, for whatever reason, be able to say, wow, this is absolutely true, and I'm giving my life totally to this, and I'm going to pursue it with every fiber of my being. They weren't able to do that because it just didn't, they couldn't rationalize it. It didn't make sense. I have to believe that at some point, I don't know what kind of hell they'll have to go through first. And I think to an extent, everybody that doesn't, accept Jesus as Lord, I think there's some type of hell that they'll have to go through. We go through enough hell here on earth to know that we go through hell, and to imagine that we go through a little bit more before we go, oh, that's right, I see that I really screwed up. There was this path that I should have taken, could have taken, didn't know about taking, never even heard of taking, but I see now, and I see how true it is, and that's exactly where my heart is. I think there are people whose heart is not in that direction. I think some people actually hate God and are doing everything they can to oppose God, and I think that they will suffer hell a lot worse. I think it'll be hard for them to repent. I think the door is always open to even them, but I don't think that they can walk through because I don't think their heart actually desires it. Their heart just, I think it's really, I think it's sad, and I think, it's very important to share with people like that because I think people will suffer deeply, badly, that don't accept this word and don't pursue it and don't attempt to purify their lives. But that particular, realization that there was one way, the one way kind of thing. That's why the one way, Jesus movement type of the '60s, the one way. I had a sign out of my dorm room there in Sproul Hall. I'd found, I don't know where I found it on the road somewhere.
Sign the one way.
I found a one-way sign, and I had it sitting outside of my dorm room, in the window. It was outside. You could see a Sproul Hall, and see my little one-way
cool.
sign pointing up.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Yeah. So this, so your entire life leading up to this, you're you're questioning what's behind the curtain, what's making this magic happen, who's controlling these puppets or in various forms, what's the truth. And you feel like once you acknowledged God, Christ, I am that I am. Once you acknowledged that, what was the experience? Do you feel that level of peace was introduced immediately? I'm sure you've done, countless hours of research and study just on that train, but it became apparent that that's the answer, and everything, uh, all the cogs kind of fit into place at that point for you.
It was at the moment that I realized these little set of of answers to questions that were really important questions for me. Those were things that I just had to understand. When I saw that, and there were some things about the crucifixion that I saw. I saw that if Jesus came to earth, then his job was actually to reconcile man with God, that the symbolism of the cross was something that indicated that that was something that he did. The image of being arms extended, head up, feet down, elevated above the earth, that he was actually in a symbolic kind of gesture, kind of being the pathway between earth and heaven. And so that death that happened there, that crucifixion, there was something there in that moment of being crucified and the dying at the hands of unrighteously dying, being murdered, being killed, being sacrificed, being the lamb that was slain, having the blood being of the lamb being slain. That was reminiscent of the Egyptian Passover, the children of Israel and the Egyptian leaving Egypt with the Passover. They put the blood of the lamb around their doorpost so that the angel of death would pass over them. And so the blood of the Lamb of God, that was given as a sacrifice for us. This was something that was an actual perfect, before the lambs and that the Israelites were supposed to offer for sacrifices, they were supposed to be the perfect. And so we had a perfect sacrifice and no blemish. And this was what was God required for remission of sin. And so Jesus was acting out all of the patterns that had been established by God in the scriptures and had been stated that this is the way that I am establishing life. I am making life this particular way. And that way of being, it was like, if that hadn't been done, it wouldn't have been as clear what the message was. God could have done the same thing. He could have done it all and just done it all in secret. But by doing it out in the open, it was a way of giving a message to those with eyes to see. And so that was an important thing. So God did not reveal how he created the creation in detail. He didn't tell how the mechanics of how the forgiveness of sin produced this how the shedding of blood, how the crucifixion, how the lamb, what was the mechanism by which he forgave sin. He didn't give a detailed description, the why, the how, the what of it, the details of it. Not there. It was just like the mass, space, energy, and time and physics. Physics didn't tell me all of those things. God didn't tell us all those things in the Bible either. None of this. None of it. He just said, we had a prophet come, we had John come, we foretold he was coming. We had prophets throughout the Old Testament say that he was coming. We had people during that period of time that had said they weren't going to leave until they saw the Lamb of God. There was just lots of different things that were life examples. They were not explanations. They weren't, this caused this, and then when we did this, and this is the reason we did that, and this is why everything. There was none of that. It was just that we're doing this thing, and we're doing that thing, and we're doing this thing. And if you look for the symbolism in those things that were done, you can say, wow, maybe this meant that, and this meant that, and this stood for that. And then we had the same, and there was a sequence of those things that happened in the Old Testament, which was like a precursor. It was like it was a story that was told that was a key to unlock a future story. And and the meaning of what was present in the first story could be used to decode the meaning of the second story. And so the sacrificial system of the children of Israel was so clearly a precursor story, analogy, metaphor to the story of God doing the same thing, offering his son as a sacrifice for men's sins, as what was being done in the Old Testament, in the Levitical law, in the priestly law, and the way that they forgave sins. So the Bible was interpreting itself without saying how anything happened, why it happened, what the mechanism was, the reasons behind it, what was going on in heaven, what was the dynamic, what was God's motivation. Nothing. There were not given any of that information. So if any of that kind of things come out, we're going to have to make it up. We're going to have to actually postulate and say, given the symbolism of what we see, we've got the Old and New Testament, what actually is consistent? What's a story? What's mechanism? What physically makes sense? It's consistent with that. What makes sense symbolically? What makes sense spiritually? How do we create a story that actually tells this, that interprets itself and is consistent with the story that was revealed, the one that we do have? We do have something solid. We have the books of the Old and New Testament, and that's the only thing solid we've got. Everything else we're going to have to make up. And as a result of that, people have a lot of different ideas. There's a lot of ideas of what happened. And, whatever, it really comes down to whatever works. If something is good enough for you to say, yeah, I'm convinced, I felt it in my heart, I'm going to change, I'm going to live for God, I'm going to try and live, the way Jesus lived, I'm going to try and, spread the gospel and let other people live this way. Whatever it takes, that's good. We don't want to say, hey, we've got a better way, we've got the only way. No. It's whatever way works. I had something that happened to me. It spoke to me. It answered my questions. I then pursued it. I was able to develop a physics theory from those concepts that actually seems like it fits with all of conventional physics and gives an explanation where you don't see explanations in other ways. But it makes it so that it's something I can go, the story that we've got of Jesus dying for our sins, that actually fits in with this vision I had. We haven't really talked about why, but there was a lot of why that I had to actually, over a period of time, it took a long time to get that level of detail of like, how did this make sense? But I had this sense from the very beginning, right at the very beginning of when I saw those three things. I saw the I am that I am, I saw the same way up the mountain, and I saw Jesus being the part of the Son, and then I saw one other aspect of it. I saw Jesus creating all of the other points and declaring all the other points of consciousness, filling up the universe with points of consciousness by saying, that is. And he created points of consciousness that could look back at him and say, oh, there you are. Yes, I see you created me. And I can see all the other points of consciousness that you created. And so we can see each other, and we'll interact with each other. So all the things that I see as Christ creating all these points, all the things I believe, the way that these other points see each other is because they are all part of his body, and the reason why. And so it becomes a world filled with conscious points, and I could see, oh, that was agglomerated together, and those, became more complex particles, which became, more complex and became rocks and became humans and, planets and filled up the universe.
That's no, that's really fascinating. I think that we should wrap up and kind of summarize. I mean, we started up talking about your education and your you weren't content with the bare minimum explanation of any field that you were in and and it led you to different studies of physics and different studies of medicine and spirituality and openness and this road of openness and all the paths leading upward and eventually finding God, finding Christ in this place that allowed you to have peace and a little bit more it lined up more with logic and with your different studies and and it led you to this theory of absolutes that we've been talking about in previous episodes and previous days. Um, but yeah, man, what a fantastic journey. What a, and it's obviously we've only covered little bits of it, but what a wild journey to get you to that understanding and then having the peace to then dedicate your life to researching all of the elements that how much more can we understand? How much more can we get out of this? How much more can we live in it and recognize that we are all just a part of this bigger picture created by
Mhm.
God himself. Man, that's fascinating. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Thanks for talking and yeah, how are you feeling?
Good. Just just as final note, after I had that insight, I didn't need the cannabis anymore. Just that was just a tool, to be able to see into the spirit realm. And at this point, I feel like any kind of stimulant. I don't do coffee. I don't do alcohol. I don't do anything. Just I try to eat just really calming foods, things that, don't stimulate or disturb me, and just be able to be at kind of a place of, peace and not be overstimulated or understimulated, just kind of just be in life.
Mhm.
And it was a turning point. That was the thing. This is what I needed to rationally come to a belief, a faith. And it was that particular recognition that this was how Mass was created. I said, oh, this particular little idea that God created conscious points, that Christ created conscious points that filled the universe, those conscious points can be commanded to do anything. God could have instantly created the entire universe by just saying, move here and there in a particular condition, and we could have had a prefab universe like that. And so if a person is really, wants to, needs to the universe to be 6,000 years old, I have no problem with that. It's like God could absolutely have done that. I personally don't think it's necessary to maintain a biblical integrity to believe that. I think that we can actually look at just the fossil record and see how God moved and made things little by little,
Mhm.
and came to this point, and just be and hold the Bible in as high a regard as the person that said that it was done in 6 days, because the Bible said it was 6 days. It was done in 6 days, and anything else is heretical. I go, if that's what's necessary, what a person really has to believe to feel that the Bible is true and to feel its integrity is being honored, I'm all for it. Absolutely. You know, that it, I don't, what matters is not what particular little method you use to come to a belief. What matters is how you live your life. Are you going to live your life in a way that is completely true to the way that God's heart is pleased? And whatever it takes to do that, and I do believe coming to Jesus, I don't think it's optional. I don't think it's like you get to, I don't think all roads get to the top of the mountain. I think there is only one top of the mountain. And I believe that, you know, you can, if you came up in another, you know, religious tradition, you probably learned a lot of really good stuff. And I probably have a lot to learn from you if that's something that you came from. I want to actually know about all your traditions and things you learned and ways you see life, because that life, if it was a godly life, it was a life that had caring and loving for other people, then there's messages and lessons for us in how to do that in that particular situation. But I do believe everyone is going to be required to bow to the knee to Christ. I don't think there's any exception.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful, man. That's man, what a story. You know, I mean, and it's not over, you know. It's
Mhm.
we're just scratching the surface, I think, of what it means to be human, interacting with everything else around us, and
Mhm.
be interacting with God and in however we know Him as individuals and conscious beings.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I think it's a good I think it's a good stopping point for this particular story and subject matter. I yeah, I really wanted to kind of get to know your story and your you know timeline
Mhm.
and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Walk down memory lane. Thanks for asking. It was fun.
Yeah, cool. Cool.
Okay, we'll do it again later.
Yep. Sounds
Okay.
good. All
Have a
right.
good night.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.